there is hope. Yes, our world has turned upside down in the past month, but we will get through this together. And as adventurers, we have a built-in resilience and grit, so I suspect we will fare better than our more timid friends. Perhaps no industry has been as disrupted as the travel industry, who virtually saw their livelihood shut down overnight and had to figure out how to deal with the upcoming tours and get the logistics figured out for repatriating guests and guides. So in actuality, their income disappeared as their workload doubled. Off the mic, our guest today, Paul, mentioned that every Friday feels like it's been a month since the previous Monday. So today, I bring you hope and insights from 3 of the adventure travel tour industry leaders about what's going on in the field, how they're coping, what are the silver linings out of this, and yes, there are always silver linings, and different ways that we can help our favorite companies ride this rogue wave. So let's get started. Welcome to the Active Travel Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks, and today I'm really excited to bring you this special bonus episode where I'm interviewing 3 industry leaders and getting us the inside scoop. My first guest is Paul from one of my favorite adventure tour companies and affiliates, Active Adventures, which is based in New Zealand. You may recall I toured New Zealand on Active Adventures Rimu and Kari Adventures, which I covered on my 3-part series last summer. I'll put links in the show notes. The trip was epic and remains my top all-time favorite adventure, and I've been to some amazing places. While there, I hiked sections of several New Zealand's best trails, including the Tongariro Alpine Crossing. I heli-hiked on the Franz Josef Glacier and climbed through ice caves. I went mountain biking in the Wakaririwa Forest. I kayaked in Milford Sound and tubed in an underground cave filled with glowworms. There are far too many adventures to list on this epic trip. You got to make sure that you check out the show. It was a magical adventure. We've also covered many Active Adventures tours on this show, including Machu Picchu, Mont Blanc, Patagonia, Nepal, the Dolomites, and the Italian lakes. Their tour offerings are iconic bucket list adventure travel destinations. Active Adventure has recently even ventured into Africa and Iceland. I have personally experienced and heard nothing but wonderful things about Active Adventures, and I'm delighted to have them on the show. In fact, Active Adventures has a 5-star rating from almost 600 reviews on Trustpilot, which is my favorite resource for checking out a tour company. Welcome to the program, Paul, and thanks for getting up so early to join us.
Hi, Kit. No, it's great to be here. It's nice to speak to you again.
I know. We actually met, but I guess about a little over a year ago. So that was wonderful. And times sure have changed since then.
Gosh, yeah, we wouldn't be at that cafe right now.
That's for sure. Yeah, so the reason I wanted to have you on the program is because everybody is concerned and we want to find out your insights into what's going on, how we can help. And so I thought I'd put together a roundup of some tour operators to see from the inside what your perspective is on this.
That sounds good.
And so my first question is when did you realize, oh, brother, this is going to be a big deal?
Look, I think we were all following the situation closely in China in January. And at that stage, it's probably fair to say it hadn't sunk in as to quite how global the situation might unfold to be. I think when it started to hit Europe, there was a lot more realization that this really was going to be moving from an epidemic into a pandemic. So I'd say sometime around mid-February.
Okay, yeah, because you dealt with the SARS and the MERS and all that, where it was somewhat contained. And this one kind of left the gate and all of a sudden it spread.
That's right. This virus doesn't respect any borders, as you know, and it's impacted every part of the world. So having, as you mentioned, we do run trips globally. So it was quite quickly a situation where we were looking at our trips around the world on a daily, if not hourly basis, and just trying to make regular decisions about when is the right time to cancel trips, evacuate our clients safely, make sure that we can get all our guides back home. We're kind of through that period now, but it's very fresh in my memory of being a very sort of quick decision, slightly stressful period. But I think our operations team did a fantastic job through that.
Yeah, and unlike a lot of tour companies, you actually use one of your people on each tour. So you had your people scattered around the globe. What did you do? How'd you get them home? Or tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's right. So at that time, we had, it's right in the middle of our Himalaya season. So we had groups hiking on the Everest track and the Annapurna track. one of the benefits, I suppose, of having locals on the ground as well as our Kiwis working in tandem was that we were getting information before it became public, essentially. So we knew that in the Himalaya, they were looking to close down the borders. I don't know exactly what date this was now, a few weeks ago, but we knew that that was coming. We had about 4 or 5 days to evacuate people from those remote trekking trails back to Kathmandu and onto airlines to get home. And so there were some very sort of late night, sort of quick decisions made that, right, we have to do this. We don't want to risk anybody being stuck in Nepal at this time because we don't know how long they could be stuck for. We were all very relieved to get everyone onto flights. We managed to bring our guides home straight into quarantine. So they are all probably coming towards the end of their 2 weeks quarantine now. And all our clients were able to get back to their homes around the world.
That's great. Now you have a policy anyway, because things happen, that people can apply their deposit to future trips. How are you handling this whole, you don't even know what's going on, cancellations, you don't know when people can actually start traveling again? Tell us a little bit about what's going on in Active's world when it comes to just trying to figure out what to do there.
Yeah, good question. I think, first of all, I'd say that our clients have been incredibly understanding, patient through this whole situation. We have cancelled trips at this stage until the end of July, which is perhaps further out than we needed to, but we felt that it was important to provide some level of certainty to people when there isn't much certainty out there. So what we've done for the majority of our clients is trip switch them to a future departure that might be next year or even the year after, where we are a lot more confident they'll be operating again. That has been really received very well. So we've had positive feedback. Most people want to hang on to that dream of doing an adventure trip. And we've been able to talk to them about, the fact that we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're still around when international travel bounces back.
And what is your outlook for the industry in general and the small group adventure tour companies in particular?
I'm optimistic. As I mentioned, it is uncertain times. There will be change in the way people travel. I think my view is that mass tourism, as we know it, might be seen in a less favourable light, but that people will be more motivated to get away from the crowds, seek authentic and immersive experiences in wilderness locations, which ultimately I think bodes quite well for small group operators like ourselves. So, yeah, certainly international tourism is going to take a bit longer to rebound with border closures and as various countries respond to the crisis. So I expect there will be a slight change of focus in the short term to catering more to domestic type travel, which I think we can, if we need to, adjust our products slightly to appeal to New Zealanders and possibly Australians. But I think in the medium to long term, as I said, I'm very optimistic that we'll be operating all of our trips around the world and doing what we do best.
Right. And adventure travel has been growing like crazy anyway. And people, they want to travel. So it's not like they don't want to. It's just right now they're just scared to. So, and can't. So are there any silver linings in what's been going on? Have you seen some things that, hey, this is kind of a cool, positive thing that's happened with all this mess?
Yeah, definitely. Personally, I'm finding that among my circle of friends, there's a lot of desire to connect and communicate. As we're all stuck at home, it sort of gives you a bit of time to reflect and reach out to each other. So I've had a lot of good phone calls with friends. And within the company, we're also seeing some really strong communication. We're making an effort to touch in with each other and touch base, see how everyone's coping. So I think there's been a strong sense of community. And here in New Zealand as well, at a national level, it's the same thing. We're all in this together, this virus. And so what I'm seeing is within the tourism industry, our suppliers are working really well with us. And then, communities are working together to make sure that we do respect the lockdown, so to speak. And I think there's been, at least here, a really strong support of the actions that the government are taking to control this virus. So I feel like everyone's coming together and a sort of common goal.
Very cool. Now, we listeners and adventurers, we love our tour companies, but we're a little scared because we don't know when things are going to get better and all that. So we'd like to help, but the travel insurance companies, unless you buy a cancel for any reason policy, which I wasn't able to find for a Croatia trip, I'd already booked in the fall. So is there a way, we mentioned earlier about your guarantee, that people could say, okay, I would like to do this so that we can help you. And then we just kind of maybe apply it to some trip later. In fact, another interview I did earlier, we just give a deposit. And then once we see things open up, then we pick a trip. Is there things like that we could do to help?
Definitely. We've had some really good ideas from our sort of loyal clients about this. I guess, firstly, the active adventures assurance that we have, whenever anybody pays a deposit, that's a fully transferable deposit. So they are able to change that to a future trip. So it's a commitment that is really flexible, as long as that's made sort of 90 days before departure. The other point is, even beyond that, a deposit is not quite the right thing right now. The things that we're looking at are potentially travel vouchers that may offer added value to the customer. So a travel voucher that might be worth slightly more than you actually pay for it for the future. So that's one idea that we're looking at. We're also looking at, this is slightly different, but merchandise and those proceeds going towards helping our guides that are no longer able to guide at the moment. And that's been something that's been a popular request by so many past active travelers who are really keen to help out wherever they can during this difficult time. So we've been overwhelmed actually by the response we've had. We've got a video series up at the moment, which is asking our clients to post their questions about, how we're getting through this, and some of the questions that you've asked me, Kit. And we've been really amazed by the ideas that have been coming through.
Yeah, I watched those videos. In fact, I'll embed those in the website page that goes with this episode so people can watch those, because it really helps us get a feel for what you're doing, how you're responding, and how you're taking care of your people and your clients.
Yeah, we're trying to take this opportunity to engage. I know that there's a lot of companies doing something similar, which is great, because it's an opportunity at the moment. Whilst everybody is unable to travel, it doesn't mean that they can't dream about it. We've kind of got a bit of an active family. We've got, over the years, travelers that have done 8, 9, 10 trips with us. And so we do consider them part of our family. And we do want to keep up that regular communication, and videos, one of the ways that we can do that.
Now, when you look back on the company, I don't know how long you've been working there. We've been talking for at least 2-3 years now together. What do you think makes Active Adventures a special company?
I think it's the people. It's the people within the business. It's our guides, and it's the people that choose to travel with us. We've got a really strong culture. We've got a culture of caring deeply about what we do and focusing on the details to make sure that the service and the experience that we deliver is of the highest level. Yeah, I've been at Active for 10 years and many of my colleagues have been there longer. And I think it's just such a strong culture that we're all in this together. And it kind of shines through when you're faced with adversity. So something like this virus. We've been through earthquakes, we've been through volcanoes, we've been through lots of challenges. And it's times like this where you know that you've got a good team behind you that kind of all work towards the same goal.
And is there a takeaway that you'd like us to have today?
I think for me, it's really nice to hear that your listeners are thinking about the future and keen to keep that travel dream alive. And from my side, I think it's just important to share that as a business, Active Adventures is fully committed to being around for the long term. We're a passionate group. We welcome the challenge that this presents, and we expect that we are going to need to change and adapt, because who knows what this landscape's going to look like. But we will be here, and we wish to share our experiences with your listeners.
Well, Paul, I really appreciate you coming on the program and letting us hear the perspective from Active Adventures. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Kit. Stay safe, and let's stay in touch.
Next up is Dan Austin, founder of the popular Austin Adventures. Austin Adventures is an adventure travel tour company based in Billings, Montana. It is easier to list where Austin Adventures doesn't go than where they do go. While I was familiar with Austin Adventures and their fine reputation, it wasn't until I visited Billings last summer that I got a chance to meet, go hiking, and even rappelling with some of his family and team. Austin Adventures is a first-class operation that knows how to have fun. When all this coronavirus mess clears up, I'm planning to go on either Austin Adventures Yellowstone and Grand Teton Adventure or their Big Sky, Yellowstone, and Paradise Valley Adventure. I still haven't figured out which one yet. After all, who better to go with than Austin Adventures because no one knows Yellowstone better, considering it's right in their backyard. Austin Adventures has been in business over 35 years, is proudly family owned and operated. They offer exciting small group adventure tours all over the world and have twice won the prestigious Travel + Leisure's World's Best Award as the #1 adventure tour operator. Welcome to the program, Dan.
Hey, well, thanks, Kit. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm delighted. I know, just the world's just gone upside down, and I wanted to get you and some fellow tour operators on to let us know what's going on out in the field because we're worried about you, we're worried about the virus, we're worried about us and our travel plans. And so I guess to start with, when did you finally know, Houston, we got a problem? What was going on?
Well, Kit, that's a great question. One of the things that I always suggest is, one of the reasons why I go with it, whether it be a travel professional, a travel agent or a tour operator, is it is our job to keep our eye on things. I mean, literally, that's what we do. So we first started, sensing something was going on, getting news alerts way back in January. And then we started tracking it. We put it on our radar. Okay, we better keep an eye on this. And so literally, we've been aware of what's going on for, a couple months now. So it wasn't a, oh my gosh, wake up, read the morning newspaper type of thing. It was, we have been concerned and very, optimistic, but keeping an eye on it for many months now.
So you saw this coming, and so how are you coping and what have you had to do and what kind of adjustments have you had to make?
Well, I think that, one of the things we did is we enacted just a policy we made up, and that's both internally and externally. And I call it the ABCs. It's anticipate, be honest, and communicate. So I think my team has, rallied together quite well. Even now, we're all working offsite. We had one person in the office. Now, as of today, we have no one. And yet we're probably communicating more now than ever. And we also take that same approach with our guests. We're being proactive and we're calling all of our guests at least every couple of weeks, if not every week, and giving them what updates we know. We're not forecasting. We're not suggesting we know more than they do or more know than the federal government does. But we're at least keeping everybody in what their options are. We've had great response, great support from our customer base. Many are choosing to reschedule for 2021. Some are rescheduling for fall of 2020, and others are saying, hey, heck, let's just let it ride and see where it goes. And then, of course, some are canceling. But it's really, I actually believe it's brought all of us a little bit closer together. We're a little bit closer to our customer base. We're a little bit closer as a team, and we're working through it about as optimistically as you can.
That's great. And I think, too, whenever there is a problem or a crisis, that really shows the character of a company. And that's a chance for a company to shine. And so that's probably why things are so favorable with your customers right now.
I agree. And the other thing is you got to use common sense. And this is probably more for the other tour operators out there. I mean, every single day I get hundreds and hundreds of emails. Some of them are coronavirus updates. Some of them are, sales updates and things like that. I think now the news is so inundated with updates, we don't need to add fuel to the fire. So we've taken a real soft approach to our marketing, almost not shutting it down. But what we decided to do is we've launched these great virtual adventures for kids. In fact, we have one today going to Alaska at 12 o'clock. Shameless plug there.
Not a shameless plug, because that was on my list to ask you about, because I think that's fantastic. So yeah, well, let's go ahead and jump into that. Tell us about this. I mean, the parents they don't know what to do with their children. So this is a great avenue. So let's segue into that.
It really is. And what we decided, we just had this wild idea. My daughter is our president, and she's also her education, her formal education was a elementary school teacher, and she's absolutely a kid magnet. I mean, to know her is you see it right away. She's the Pied Piper of kids. And, she was rated in 2014 the #1 family tour guide in the world.
This is Casey you're talking about?
Yeah, it's Casey.
Okay. Yeah. She's wonderful.
Yep. And so really worked hard with Casey to come up with some ideas. We launched our first one last Thursday to Yellowstone. A little bit about what a national park is, and then went into Yellowstone. This week we're going into Alaska. But what we're really doing is we're trying to make it both fun and educational. And the reviews we've gotten, the turnout we've gotten, we had on 2 days' notice, we had over 1,000 kids at the first one.
That's great. And do you have to be there at a specific time, or can you listen to it and watch it later?
It's a little bit more fun if you go live, because they are live and you can ask questions. And so we try and interact with the kids that are live, or at least a few of them anyways. But then it also is recorded and posted on the website. So you can still go see the Yellowstone one from last week on the site.
Oh, cool. I will go ahead and, is that on YouTube?
It is. The link is on our website to YouTube. Yes.
Okay. I'll go ahead and I'll embed that on the website for this episode so people can see what you're talking about. And hopefully they'll go to the website and check it out for themselves and their children. That sounds really cool. What a great idea.
It's been fun. We're going to do it every Thursday at 2:00 Eastern time. Trying to get to every Tuesday and Thursday, but there's so dang much work. We're just, we're literally, working on getting one out a week. And so that's basically been our marketing message. You know what? You don't need to, no one's thinking about, where their next trip is. So we're trying to figure out a way to give back a little bit and help those parents that are home learning what it's like to try and educate their kids. And again, it's just been so well received. We're pretty excited about it.
Oh, cool. So you have your staff working remotely. How did you handle the guide situation?
The guides we're working with them every day. In fact, this afternoon, we're having a Zoom guide cocktail party. So we've invited all of our guides to meet us at 4:00 this afternoon for bring their favorite beverage. And we're just going to get together and we're going to hear how they're doing, what they're doing, and so literally we've got such an amazing core crew of guides that have been with us 10, 15 years. We're just literally today, we're going to sit down. First wave of cancellations was March and April, and that really affected a couple of guides. But it's really our season really gets into full speed come June 1st. And so still guardedly optimistic that there's going to be some June trips. Kind of a wait and see mode. Every day is different. So literally just like we've taken with our guests and the rest of the staff, we've just been communicating with them. Casey manages our guide pool, and every single week she does a kind of an in-house guide newsletter with updates and just making sure we're there for them.
Good. And you mentioned too about cancellations. You have always had a rescheduling policy. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and if there's any twist now that the coronavirus is here?
Yeah, well, we just looked at it real hard, what our long-term cancellation policy has been for decades, and then tried to liberalize it a bit to more current times. So literally, if a guest wants to reschedule, there is no fees, no fines, no whatever penalties. They can reschedule. If they cancel within 30 days, if the trip is still scheduled to run and they cancel within 30 days, we are working with them to reschedule. But there are a few costs associated in that 30-day window. For the most part, what we've decided is the only true hard fast policy is no policy. So in other words, we posted on our website our updated policies, but we're talking to any and all guests what their particular personal situation is, how we can help, and what we can do. About 10% of our guests are just literally challenged one way or another, whether it be a time constraint, a cost constraint, now they can't afford to travel, whatever the case may be. I actually personally take all those. So my team has been doing great working with everybody to get them rescheduled. And then if there's, extenuating circumstances or something specific, then I jump in and see what I can do to help.
That sounds fair enough. So have you had a chance to take a pause and kind of think, what is the industry going to look like when all this settles down?
Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of my little sanctuary every day. I got to go to be optimistic. I'm a glass half full kind of guy by nature. So I've got to think about what's next. And we're working on that. We're literally, we've been working on it. We're pretty convinced there's going to be a very solid travel bounce in general. And then there's going to be even a more solid domestic travel bounce. So we're really making sure that we have all of our domestic product scheduled, ready to go. 2021, all out there on the website for schedules. People are starting to book 2021. But I'm pretty convinced there's going to be a pretty good bounce. Adventure travelers by nature are a little bit more resilient. So literally when we start seeing daylight and things start slowing down, it's not dominating the news. I think people are going to start traveling, and I think domestic travel is going to see that bounce first.
Yeah, I agree. I think as they put their toes back in the water, they're going to feel safer at quote unquote home, wherever their home is in their home country. And then once, that went all right, then I think they'll venture further afar after that, in my opinion.
Exactly. And we're already seeing that. I mean, we've picked up some fall bookings for people that were, planning to go to Europe or planning to go on a cruise or planning to go afar. And they've literally, even though maybe they didn't have to cancel, they have canceled their fall international trips and rebooked something more domestically.
And after you've been around long enough to have gone through the 9/11 travel shutoffs that we had there where people just didn't go anywhere, how does this kind of compare with that scenario in any way?
Yeah, we're all talking about it. I mean, we've been through 9/11, we've been through SARS, we've been through mad cows, we've been through the economic downturn. So literally, we are pretty resilient. And I think that, again, the adventure travelers are pretty resilient. Frankly, it's way worse, in my opinion, than all of those. It's happening so fast. And so obviously 9/11 happened fast. But after a few days, you knew what you were dealing with. Here, every single day is something new and a new direction, a new kind of, vibe, what this is all about. So we knew what we were dealing with then. This might be a little bit closer to the economic meltdown of 2008, but again, it's different because the economic meltdown was all due to the banking industry. And once this is over with, and once we get through the next couple of months, the minute they flip the light switch on, that the restaurants are open and the trails are open and the parks are open and the hotels are open, it's going to be immediate back to work. Whereas with the economic meltdown, it took time. It literally took, we had to build back everything. Here, everybody's just queued up and ready to turn that light switch back on.
Right, definitely. And I imagine each crisis, you learned a little something that you can make ways to manage a little bit better the next one, even though you don't know what the next crisis is going to be. You're learning little tricks and ways to make it through, I imagine.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I unfortunately, yes, the best experience is that firsthand experience. But I also think that, the one thing that we have learned is that communication is key. And again, that's both external and internal. Communication is 100% key because nobody likes surprises.
This is a little bit more about going back to the cancellation kind of thing. We would like to help our tour companies. We love you guys, but also we're scared. And now the travel insurance people are not covering COVID at all, unless you buy the cancel for any reason. And when I have an upcoming trip to Croatia in the fall, they wouldn't even let me buy that. So do you see this flexible policy going on, or what can we do as your customers to help the tour companies that we love get through this while still protecting our own hides a little bit? Does that make sense?
Great question. I think one of the things that I encourage everybody to do is, let's not have there's a lot of small tour operators out there, especially the international, small, great tour operators, but they're living hand to mouth. Right? I mean, they literally are. So a run on the bank, demanding your money back, that's a tough one for a lot of the little guys to handle. So work with them as best you can and reschedule, postpone, not cancel. So that's number one. That helps everybody. It also gives you gives your audience something to look forward to. And we're hearing that more and more and more. Why would I cancel? Well, I'm going to need a vacation when this is all over with. So that's number one. The thing that we're suggesting, first off, again, working with a travel professional or a good travel tour operator. I mean, that's just key, right? That's just, kind of common sense almost. And then what we're suggesting for people that are hardy and are, still hoping to get out there in July and August is, book your trip and, go ahead and pay for it if you want, make the final payments on a credit card. So you have a little bit of support there, but don't buy your airfare. That's one of the big hurdles anytime, even in good times, is that, we are small and can be flexible on cancellation policies and lateral movement, all those things. But the airlines have always typically been a little bit harder to work with, although they are definitely working on their cancellation policies and their rescheduling policies now. But I think airfares will come down. So literally get that trip booked and then, get one of the apps that gives you fare alerts and things like that. And just hang tight on your air. There'll be more inventory than we know what to do with for your airfare. And so that's the simplest advice I have.
And I have to give a plug to, I was supposed to be in Italy at the beginning of March and then to Portugal before Italy really went down the tubes. And I have to give credit to Delta did a great job. Ryanair was terrible, which we could kind of expect that. But they said we have flexibility to do whatever we want when I called up. I mean, they were great. And I don't often say that about airlines these days. So I think even they are trying to, they realize these are unprecedented times and they want to still be standing and have your loyalty after all this mess.
Yeah, Delta's always been one of my favorites. They just seem a little bit more customer service based, and that's our mantra is everything about the customer. So they align well. But yeah, that's the simplest advice I have. I do think when we get through this, it's going to take time, but start looking at whether or not you want to travel this fall, or if you really want to wait it out and be safe, and you say, you know what, 2021 is looking really good. Make a small deposit on a trip for 2021, not for both. Yes, it helps the tour operators and the travel agents out, but more importantly, it gives you something to look forward to. Then you start all of a sudden living vicariously through that. I'm going to Croatia next spring, and things, it gives you something to be positive about. Don't get caught up in the kind of the woe is me that's going on right now. It is seriously depressing if you get caught up in the daily news. I mean, it's a very serious event happening, but we can make the most of it with having the most positive attitude possible. And having a great trip on the books is a good way to do that.
Is it possible, and this is just off the top of my head, what you just said, if I put in a deposit, but we don't know the timeline and say, I just want to take a trip when it's safe, but I don't know if it's going to be in the fall or the spring or whatever, and just apply that towards any Austin trip later?
Sure. That's a great policy. I might have to write that one up. I like that idea. So
that way we're supporting you, but we just don't know when,
Yeah. And again, it's that, put it in the bank, gosh, I'm old enough to remember when they used to have those vacation accounts at the banks.
Yes.
I don't know if they still do that.
Yes. And then the Christmas savings, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where you pay every month. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's what it was for. It was to give you something to look forward to. So absolutely, that's a great idea. And again, the tour operators, the travel agents out there will appreciate it. I mean, I really, my heart goes out to the travel agent community because they're the front lines. And so literally anything we can do to help them. They typically don't get their commissions till after the guest has traveled. So I know some of them are struggling even more than tour operator community. So we're trying to do what we can to help them as well. So, if nothing else, give them a call and talk to them and make sure they know that you still support them. And when we do start traveling again, we'll have a place to go.
Okay, I want to circle back to your tours again as we're winding down. You always showcase your wow moments. In fact, I'm going to embed your video about that on the website as well. What is a wow moment for Austin Adventures, and what does that mean for us?
Well, we coined that phrase, actually a guest coined that phrase some 25 years ago, and we should have trademarked it. But those wow moments are those unexpected moments, those unexpected surprises, pleasures that actually just anchor that moment. So I always use the analogy from one of my first trips that I ever was on. I was up in Montana, and we hiked to this high mountain lake. And we got all the way up to the high mountain lake, and everybody was mesmerized by the alpine lake. It was beautiful, and we're just sitting there, just really taking it all in. It was up at Beehive Basin was the name, and one of our guides went behind a rock, disappeared for a few minutes, and then came out with a pineapple carved like a fish on a silver platter. And everybody just giggled and laughed. But then years later, when I ran into those same guests, they couldn't remember the name of that lake, but they sure remembered that pineapple. The wow moments are those unexpected, and it can be anything, those unexpected treats, surprises that you just really wouldn't expect. A hot fudge sundae on the top of Angel's Landing down in Utah, right, down in Bryce Canyon, things like that. And then our guides really have embraced it, and they have a competition every year to the most crazy wow moment. My son a couple of years ago packed in ceramic bowls, creme brulee, huckleberry sauce, and a blowtorch. And on the trails in Yellowstone in the backcountry, he did real fresh creme brulee with, again, literally right down to the blowtorch. And the guests just absolutely loved it. But it's just those little surprises that kind of anchor that moment.
That's a great idea. So we mentioned a little bit about how your team and your clients are becoming closer through all this. Are there any other positives you see coming out of this whole mess?
Well, I think the industry as a whole is coming together, yes. So I think that some of the industry leaders, whether it be the trade associations, whether it be there's the ATTA, the FTA, the USTOA. Those organizations the leaders in those organizations are doing a great job stepping up and being a voice for the industry. It is shaking out policies. People are having to look really hard at their policies, and maybe they relax. So yeah, I think that, a little bit of house cleaning maybe might be the right term. And I think that's positive. I think people are seeing the value of a tour operator because, literally we were the first to start shutting tours down to Southeast Asia and things like that, because we saw on the ground that things were different. The flights were getting canceled and things were happening quickly. If you were on your own and you weren't following this, State Department website, daily alerts and things like that, you might have headed over there on your own and still be there. I mean, there still are thousands of U.S. citizens stuck around the world right now, still stuck. I'd like to believe none of those are with tour operators, but it is, I think that's the value that a tour operator brings to the table is a little bit more in the forefront right now.
Do you have any final takeaways that you'd like us to take with us today?
We have a partnership with the Life is Good t-shirt brand. I think everybody knows Life is Good, that Bert and John Jacobs founded it 25 years ago. And if you check it out, go on social media, go on their website, whatever, and look up Life is Good. Living those Life is Good principles has really helped us. That they call them superpowers. And the list is long. It's 9 superpowers about being optimistic, being grateful, being, all of those kinds of things really help you get through what we're all going through right now. So try and keep your chin up. Try and look for ways to find a little bit of happiness in this day-to-day craziness that we're currently living in. I mean, look for the good, right? I'm currently locked down we live in Montana out on the Yellowstone River, and we're in total lockdown right now. Okay, there's worse places to get locked down. I can take my dog out and back, go take him for a swim, and be thankful that where you live and what you got going and for your family. So find the good. That's literally what it comes down to. Find the best out of this you can. Make the best out of it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Dan, so much for your time. We really appreciate you coming on the show.
Kit, anytime. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay sane, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, sounds great. Thank you. We've gotten some great insights from Paul with Active Adventures and Dan from Austin Adventures, but we've got one more interview for you to get insight into Europe and what's going on over there. So next up is Jim Johnson, founder and president of BikeTours.com out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. BikeTours.com works with over 70 local European bike tour companies offering almost 200 bike tours, both guided and self-guided, all over Europe. And the good thing is they do the vetting for you to make sure that you're touring with a top-notch local company that uses knowledgeable guides who offer the proper equipment and one that chooses quality accommodations for you. They've been in business since 2003, and they make it really easy to explore Europe by bike. Their highly trained tour advisors can help you select the bicycle tour that matches your needs and preferences. And this is really important because there are a lot of mountains in Europe, so you want to make sure you're matching your abilities with the proper tour. Presuming the virus has receded, I am actually scheduled to go on a BikeTours.com boat and bike tour of Croatia this September. And I booked it with the e-bike so I can actually get a little extra help on the hills if I need it. So this is going to be a fun, challenging, but doable and delightful ride, not some Tour de France kind of a death ride for me. Another thing that I think is cool about BikeTours.com is that they don't mark up these local European tours, but they work off the standard industry commission. So this way you're not paying any extra charge to work with a native English-speaking tour company. That means working in your own language. You don't have to figure out the logistics of how to plan the trip. You don't have to figure out who to go with. They figure out all this stuff for you. And you're paying the local tour company prices, not the more expensive North American company rates. I also love the fact that since you're going local, you're most likely to have international fellow riders in your group instead of everybody being from the US, and I think that's kind of cool. And importantly, since BikeTours.com uses local companies, most of the tour costs actually stays in the communities. It's going to the guides, it's going to the shops, the inns, and the restaurants that you're visiting. So let's talk to Jim and see how he's coping with all this stuff that's going on. Hey Jim, welcome to the program. What we want to know is, when did you realize, oh my gosh, this is a huge problem?
It actually sort of came in stages. I think this is something that most people would relate to. In January, we started seeing the various news reports out of China or about China. And some of our clients were, well, let's keep an eye on this. By the time late January, early February came in, we started getting people who wanted to cancel or postpone, and more concerned about what was going on specifically in Italy and other pockets in Europe, but not so much about whether they'd be able to fly over, fly back, or their own health. They're more concerned about going to places where there's more intense amount of the virus. And then all of a sudden, as we got on through February into March, a lot more people were saying, well, this is going to be a big problem. Then all of a sudden the government says, you can't fly over, you can't fly back. And then the government said, you can't fly anywhere. And then the government said, you can't leave your house. And as that process went through, as you can imagine, there was sort of as the restrictions and concern escalated, the concerns about bookings escalated. And I must say that we've been very, very successful in getting a lot of our clients to look toward rebooking and rescheduling as opposed to canceling, because if you book a bike tour, it's because you really want to go on a bike tour. You love the concept of bike touring. So we're really finding that people are disappointed as much as they are concerned that relative to going until this is all over, but they all still want to go.
Definitely. I mean, I know hopefully everything will be resolved before my trip in September to Croatia with you guys. But if not, I'm not canceling. I definitely want to go. That's why I signed up. So you're right. And I think the people I've been talking to too, we all still want to travel. We're travelers and we're going to go. It's just, we're a little bit unsure about how we can help and what we should be doing. So how are you guys coping at work and what's work like lately?
Well, as you can imagine, we're not handling a lot of new bookings these days. In fact, I think our last new booking was early March. What a typical workday looks like, and it's a very full workday for our staff, is really, sitting down on the phone with, or email with our clients and trying to figure out what is the best alternative for them. Another key part of this is, as you know, we don't operate our own tours. We represent small local bike tour companies all across Europe, about 70 of them right now. And a big part of what we're doing right now is dealing with each of those companies and trying to really get them to be as flexible as possible relative to how soon to a tour date can someone cancel or change without being penalized in any way. And we've been also very lucky with most of the tour companies we work with saying, okay, normally, if it's 90 days before, there's this kind of cancellation penalty, or 60 or 30 or whatever. And they're just becoming so much more flexible because they realize that, right now, no one knows what's going on. So don't penalize somebody for something that is, totally out of their control. And that's one reason that we're finding that people are willing to sort of wait a little bit and not cancel. Because if someone were told, okay, you have until, April 15th to decide, or you're going to get a penalty, people are going to cancel right now. And I don't blame them. But if someone says, okay, your tour's in September and you have until August 15th to decide, or August 1st, you're going to hang in there. Because we don't even know if flights are going to be going across the ocean by then. Certainly hope so, but we don't know. And certainly for tours that have already been canceled, no one's penalized. And we're doing our best to get people rescheduled onto other tours. Anything in March, nothing. Anything in April, nothing. In fact, normally by now we have probably several hundred people who've been on a bike tour in a given season. We've had one client go on a bike tour this year, and that was in early March. So it's a dramatically different situation.
Wow. And it rather answered my next question, which is, if you're working with 70 different tour companies, it's got to be a logistical nightmare figuring out who can do what, where. And a lot of them are small companies. They don't necessarily have the ability to absorb these tremendous hits they're taking.
No, they don't. And, a lot of them are literally, ma and pa bike tour companies, couples that have had a long time passion for bicycling and bicycle touring and are really, very passionate about their destinations, their home areas. And so, and a lot of them, don't do it because they want to make a lot of money, but they do at least need to make a living. So so many of us, they don't necessarily have 3 months, 6 months, a year's worth of savings put away to say, well, just in case there's a virus pandemic that paralyzes the world for 6 months or a year, we'll be okay. There's some companies that are, I'm sure, but a 2-person company, and even a lot of the 30-person companies that we work with, they're tapping into the last bit of their capital in many cases. And I do want to mention that most of our tours are within the European Union, the EU, and every one of them, of the companies that we work with, has to have a bond in place, a type of insurance, so that if for any reason someone's booked on a tour in September, you as an example, and that company goes out of business, there's a bond in place that will do one of two things: get your money back, or make sure the tour happens in any case. So it's something that the Europeans, because they're so dependent on tourism, they want to make sure that no one goes bankrupt or becomes insolvent and gives a European tourism industry a bad name.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. That's really nice. Hey, that's great. That's great. So I know you don't have a crystal ball, but if you have to be thinking a little bit about the future. What is your outlook for the industry, in particular, the small group adventure travel industry?
Well, I've been on a number of conference calls and webinars with folks in the tourism industry, and I guess they're sort of looking at the date that, whenever it might be, that folks say, okay, it's safe to leave your house, it's safe to go on an airplane, travel restrictions are off, you can go anywhere in Europe that you want without restriction. Whatever date that is, a lot of people are saying that it's between 3 and 6 months for the industry to start to see a resurgence, with the start being 3 months, and maybe after 6 months or 9 months, it gets back close to normal. But it's a little bit problematic in that, especially bicycle tourism is a very cyclical industry. So various times of year going to have more bookings and more travelers, and other times of year you'll have fewer. So right now, January, February, March, April is when we do about 70% of our business, get 70% of our bookings. So if all of a sudden everything is back to whatever normal is going to look like in the future in September or October, that's not when people are planning their European bike tours. So there's a possibility that we're going to get through this and everything's going to be okay, you can book now, but that's not when people book. So especially for seasonal businesses such as ours, is a real challenge. And again, as you said, who knows what that crystal ball is going to tell us in the future.
One thing, this is a roundup interview, so I've interviewed a couple different companies. And one thing that we were talking about is, my listeners, we all want to help, but we also want to make sure we're protecting ourselves. And you said with the bond issue, that protects there, but we don't even know when it's going to be open. Is there a way to do like a voucher or something like that so we can help? And then we just apply it once the dust settles and we figure out when it's okay to travel. Do you offer anything like that people could do so they can help you? Yes, I'm booking a trip. I'm not quite sure where yet because I don't know what month and all that kind of thing, just so we're helping a little bit. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I appreciate that question. And also that, sort of that frame of mind, because we're hurting. We really are hurting. And one of the things that we're doing, and I know that other companies are looking at as well, is let's say you want a $200 voucher or a $400 voucher. We'll sell you a $200 one for $175 or $400 one for $350. So in other words, give you a discount on the voucher or the gift certificate, whatever you want to call it. And, that helps us in a more immediate way. And it gives you the flexibility to book a tour later on and get more value for your money. And we're already doing that to a great extent with our existing clients to encourage them to rebook as opposed to cancel. And we're finding that folks are really receptive to that. And we've been around for 16 years. And we have clients who literally have been with us since 2003, gone on dozen or 14, 15 tours. And they've become friends. They've become family. And they don't want us to go away, in great part because they love us, they like us, and we love them. But also, we are unique in that we're not one of the big companies that's charging $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for a week. The North American companies that often do that. Although we're based in North America, we're representing, as you said earlier, just the small European companies, and their tours are so much less expensive. And we don't mark up the tours; we just take a commission from them. And what that means is that a lot of our clients who don't want to pay $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 are very happy paying $1,500 or 1,200 or 1,000 and having pretty much the same experience.
Definitely. So now if we send you money for a voucher and all that kind of thing, are we protected under that same bond thing, or is that a different thing, or are we protected with a credit card? How does that work?
It'd be protected under credit card because, the U.S. doesn't have that kind of system in place. You can't be in business in Europe without that in place. We're looking at different ways to build in some protections, but credit card is sort of your guarantee that you'll be fine.
Right. So, and particularly just to be doubly safe, there's so many that include travel insurance on there just in case a company does go belly up or something like that. So that would be a non-issue then. So yeah, that's definitely. So we'll make sure that we have links to everything in the show notes and on the website of how people can reach out to you. But now, not everything is grim. There's been some silver linings too. What have been some of the silver linings that you've seen come out of all this mess?
Well, one that I see is that, and there's no way to again, look into the future and see how things are going to be 6 months or a year after this all gets resolved, or to the extent that it can be resolved. But, you look at places like Dubrovnik that had been overrun by tourists, especially from cruise ships. Now the streets of Dubrovnik, the streets of Rome, the streets of, pretty much any place you could name, they're empty. And it's going to take a while to build back up. And not that we have many tourism cities anyhow, but what's happening is that cities that were really becoming damaged by tourism are going to have a chance to recover. And, in the countryside, we've seen in a number of places, there's less pollution, there are fewer cars. So there's all sorts of things that we can look at that maybe is going to bring us back to what it would have been like to be on a bike tour in 1951 or even 1981, where you didn't have to worry about the hordes of tourists and traffic and so on. So I think, we're going to start being able to see Europe the way it was in an earlier time. And I don't mean earlier time going back to, horses and carriages and all that, but sort of the feeling of not being overcrowded. And bicycle tourism, in any case, tends to be a much more sustainable type of tourism. As far as I know, there have been no cities overrun by bicycle tourists. They have been overrun by bus tourists and cruise ship tourists. So it's not a problem that we contribute to that much, but we certainly encounter it in many of our destinations around Europe.
Yeah, you bring up a good point too about the crowds, because I've really gotten turned off of going to some of the quote unquote A-list places because it's so crowded. I went to Egypt last fall and I would rather have seen the Sphinx in a documentary. It was just too crowded. Those that are willing to dip their toes in sooner when this crisis is over are going to be able to take advantage of some of the things you just said.
Yeah, exactly right. I don't know, whether if someone books a tour 2 years from now, whether, the traffic's going to be back and the crowds are going to be back. There's no way of knowing. But I can almost guarantee that 6 months from now, if you're on a bike tour or even, on a different type of tour in Europe, you're not going to have that overcrowding experience that you would have had 3 months ago, 4 months ago. So it's a much better experience that folks are likely to have.
So what takeaway would you like us to have today?
Tourism isn't dead. And tourism, to me, we refer to bicycle tourism as two-wheel diplomacy. And everyone who travels by bike, wherever they are, but especially in Europe or overseas, when we're coming from the US or Canada, wherever we're from, on a bike, you really have such a great opportunity to encounter people and talk with people. And also on a bike tour, you have this way to experience things that you wouldn't be able to in another way. So I would just say to people, this is definitely a time to be concerned and be patient. But when the dust settles, bicycle tourism and tourism overall, it's probably going to be better than it's been in years.
Any final thoughts?
Tourism industry has dealt with terrorism. We've dealt with exchange rates plunging. We've dealt with SARS, MERS, Ebola. So I don't want to say that we got through that so we can get through this, because there's nothing has ever been like what we're going through right now. But tourism does come back no matter what, because people have a desire to explore and experience new places and new things and encounter people. So it may take a long time, and unfortunately, some businesses aren't going to make it through that time. but tourism will come back. So I guess one key message I would say to folks is, if you were thinking about traveling, please travel. If you hadn't been thinking about it, now's the time to start, because not only the tour companies, but also the destinations around the world, the small towns, the villages, the small tour companies, the restaurants, the hotels, they all depend on tourism. So we just need to keep tourism alive and well and going.
I don't know about you, but I love the positive vibe I got from Paul, Dan, and Jim. They didn't ask for this crisis, but they acknowledged the beast and have steeled themselves for the battle that they intend to win with grace and grit. And they intend to come through this stronger. Through crisis, they have formed an even tighter bond with their clients and their team members. I know we're all going to be traveling again one day. We just don't know when. So what can we do to help our travel industry friends? Here's a couple things. Number 1, if you have a future booking that's affected by the pandemic, postpone it, don't cancel it. Again, postpone, reschedule, but don't cancel. Number 2, if you have the wherewithal, then book a future trip now. Personally, I'm planning on putting a deposit down with all 3 of these companies today. I'm going to do it with Active Adventures, Austin Adventures, and BikeTours.com. It's my show of faith and support of these great companies. And I hope that you'll do the same with your favorite tour companies as well. If they have a voucher system set up, I'm going to use that. Otherwise, I'm just going to book something for either the end of this year or early 2021 that I can postpone if things are a little bit dicey. We just got to make sure that we're using our credit card to book, ideally one that's got a built-in travel insurance, and many of them do, so just make sure you're using that as your travel card, and use a company with a liberal tour change policy. Another thing that I thought was really cool was how Jim pointed out that destinations are going to be deliciously quiet for who knows how long. We're going to have this window of opportunity that makes me think back to when my parents were traveling, when my dad worked for Pan Am back in the 70s. Those were the glory days of travel when everything was new and exciting and not crowded. Everything was really crowded. And now we're going to have this window of opportunity. And I don't know about you, but I'm going to pounce. So number 2 is if you have the wherewithal, go ahead and book some trips. Number 3, if let's say you're not in a position, you got laid off or you just can't right now, then send your favorite companies an email of encouragement and support. Let them know you care. You could hear in their voices how pleased they were that you guys want to help. And you just need to know what to do, but you want to do so smartly, right? So book if you can. Let them know you care about them if you can't. And number 4, one way that we can help that's really easy, and that is to share this episode. You want to encourage your friends and family to listen to today's show and see if they can help support too. We're all in this together. So remember, we want to postpone, don't cancel, book and support, and share this episode. We can all do this. Until next time, stay safe, and hopefully soon I'm going to be able to once again encourage you to adventure on.